every professional at some point in their life has hit rock bottom and wondered if it's even worth trying anymore. But today we have someone who proves that no matter how tough your circumstances, success is always possible. I'm thrilled to introduce Sara Storm, an advisor, speaker, and a consultant who's gone from a challenging upbringing to becoming a leader in driving growth and sales excellence. Her journey is a testament to resilience, determination, and the power of pushing forward when life gets tough. And hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Just Be Better podcast, where we explore the stories and strategies behind personal growth, leadership, and success. Sara has built an incredible career holding leadership roles, and today we're diving deep into her career journey, accomplishments, and the powerful lessons she's learned. So, Sara, welcome to the show today. I'm really excited to have you here. And could you give a brief overview to our listeners of who is Sara?
I am bipolar, borderline personality who's worked in revenue my entire life. I come from a super poor background, so I came from a household where food was a scarcity. I worked my way up to a place where I now run 2 different brands and a company. I've done all revenue roles you can imagine. I've been super hungry my entire career. While I've been doing that, which has been a journey in itself, I have also 2 children. One is 9 and one is 17, or actually one is 10. She turned yesterday. And I am running a household with my husband and also co-founder of the business that we're running. I have many interests from a perspective of the fact that I have a lot of brain capacity and a lot of waking hours. And I love reading. I have read over 4,000 books. I love fiction. I also read business books. I play World of Warcraft. I am also super nerdy in writing, and I have produced so much content that I can't even count it. And yeah, that's me. So I'm a pretty quirky person.
But at the same time, very exciting person to speak with. And the very first thing, happy belated birthday to your little one.
Yes.
And looking through your career, and not your career, your life, you shared a little bit about your childhood. Could you share a little bit more about what challenges you faced growing up and how that impacted your life?
Yes, 100%. Because I believe that a lot of the things that happens to us as adults comes from what we went through as children, right? I think a lot of the trauma and the things that people go through that either leads them to be super successful, super hungry and super successful, or not successful at all, sort of stems from where you come from. And I grew up in Sweden, which is normally, traditionally, if you look in Europe, a pretty safe country to be in, and a safe country with a lot of safety nets. And even though I grew up with a mother who was also bipolar, who basically would drag me around state lines. In Sweden, it's kommuner, to move from socialtjänsten, which is social services, when they got notified that she was not treating me well. So she would move me to different regions so that each region would drop the case of us and just not bother her. She had her diagnosis, which was one part. She also had a very rough life as she grew up, and the cards she was dealt wasn't great. So growing up that way, where my mother would sometimes, when I was from 7, 8, when I started remembering things, could be left for a week without her coming back at that age, learning very early to take care of myself logistically, so cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, all of these things that we are supposed to have a few more years before we start learning, gave me a few insights. First of all, I realized very early that I also had a neurospatial brain. Something was not completely normal with my mind. And I also realized that I was on my own. And when you come to those conclusions, when you're 8, 9, 10, 12, it builds to 2 different paths you can go. So either I can go the path which is self-destructive for myself. And I remember lying in bed when I was 12, thinking about this and landing in the fact that, so I have a stack of cards in front of me that looks a certain way. I don't want that to limit who I will be. And this was a very conscious thought already at 12, after escaping into books for years, because I was home alone a lot. And I believe that shaped me to be the person that I am from the age of 16 when I moved out all the way up to now. Like a lot of these decisions that I made in my adult life comes from experiences when I was young. And the idea that I would grow into a person who had a career that was successful behind her, who had a situation where money wasn't a thing to worry about anymore, who was able to run businesses and have very exciting roles in different companies. In my early years, I had no idea that this was optional, even that this was a possibility. So all I knew was that I wanted to leave Älmhult, which was where I grew up, or where I was most of my youth, and go to the biggest city in Sweden to try to shape a new life, right? That's all I knew at that point. But one of the things that I realized as I've gone through my maturity journey as an adult is that there is something called the dream gap that very much is spoken about related to men and women, glass ceiling and all of these things, that is very adaptable to this situation too. Because where I was growing up, it was a small village. The context of how I could dream about what could be was very limited. Like the only path that I was looking at that was in front of me was to stay in Älmhult, get a job at ICA or a supermarket, have 2 free children, marry young, have them when I was 20 to 25, get stuck in a marriage with a person, since there was so few options, that I probably wouldn't like 10 years later. These were this is what I should be doing, because that was what everyone around me told me, showed me, and pushed me to. So that's a dream gap when it comes to poverty. So we have a situation where we have plenty of countries in Europe who are filled with people who are in poverty, and their ability to dream is driven from that ability that they have no other people around them than the people who are telling them that you need to be this, because that's your only choice when it comes to moving, right? So I believe that I am a product of my environment 100%, and I believe that people who are in that situation need people like me and like other people like me who has done this journey and moved from this place to tell them that you can dream much bigger than you're doing now. You just need to listen to other people than the people who are around you physically right now. So this is something that I'm trying to do as much as I can now as an adult, to try to be on stages and in webinars and in pods and talk about the possibilities that are out there for you as a person growing up poor or with a bad deck of cards for your life, to change it, because you have the ability. You just need help with how to dream bigger.
Firstly, very sorry to hear that you have to go through all of that at such a young age. Coming up to the conclusion that you don't want this life at year 12, you mentioned, it's incredible achievement that a lot of people, even now as adults, cannot get to. Did you have any mentors in your life at all, or role models who influenced you during those formative years, or was it a lot coming from books, or how did that happen, you think?
That's interesting, because I would say stand alone. No, I had no other role models. Since my mother was so secluded in herself, she didn't have any friends. She didn't have any family around. She cut them all out. So there was no other adult. My father left when I was 3, so he was out of our life. So there was no real people around me that I could start comparing to or even think about until I moved the last time before we sort of settled down. And then I had moved like 16 times before I started 7th grade. When I started 7th grade, which was in the same age range, basically, I found a friend, and then I started being with her family. I was like, oh my God, this is not at all what my experience is. So since my mother didn't have any people around her, because we stayed short time in every place we moved to, so I didn't have a chance to create a social network of friends. Because if I would have seen that earlier, I probably would have realized even earlier that, oh my God, our house isn't normal. Like, this is not how families are supposed to behave. So when I turned into that age and I got my first best friend that I still am friends with today, once I went to her family and started seeing the environment, I started realizing what was wrong with my environment from a perspective of feeling safe, and what was possible. So that was the first step. The second step, and I will tell everyone who's listening now, because this has saved my life when it comes to development, you need to read. Like, the idea that I'm reading so many books, what I have read in my life has shaped so much of my barriers. It has moved so much of my barriers for understanding what's possible. And when I hear how reading today is just dropping down, it scares me, because I know that there is so much opportunity in books and stories to be able to drive the ability to dream. And I don't think that I would have come to those conclusions even as an adult unless I had such a vast library of books in my mind that I had read, because it creates a whole new perspective on what is possible. So reading is a core fundamental. You can read online if you want, but read. You don't have to do the paper books like I do, because I love that. You can just read online, but at least consume information, consume stories, because it's so important, and it's been pivotal to my career success as well, because I've consumed so much knowledge about the space that I'm in, that we can talk about a bit later, that has shaped how I run my career. So reading is pivotal. It's something we basically forced our girls to do when they were younger. Now they read regularly every day. It creates unfounded access to knowledge. It's super important.
You mentioned a little bit on dreaming same gap, how it changes with you, with your environment. How did your experiences with poverty and family struggles shape your perspective of success in general when you moved through different cities?
I moved out when I was 16. I got my own apartment. I emancipated from my mother. So I went to court to get rid of the biological or the legal bond between us, right? Once I did that, I started working 3 jobs at the same time while I was going to school full time. So I started working nights, I started working weekends. I just worked my ass off because all I wanted was money. Like, I didn't want to worry about food. I wanted to be fine on the food side. Like, I will always have food at home. And that was a driver for me for several years once I left home. And when I moved to Stockholm, and this is when I was 20, which is 20 years ago now, I already had 4 years of work experience under my belt. And when I came up here, I managed to find a place to live in a week. So I found a second-hand apartment in a week. I got a job that same week because I walked into random places and I just said, you're going to hire me. I'm going to make you tons of money. So sales jobs. And I got hired like straight away. And I had nothing to lose, which is a good thing in these situations, because when you have nothing to lose, you will just risk everything because you have no choice, right? So when it came to me landing in the big city, understanding what I wanted, I still kept the idea that I just want to make money for like 5-6 years more. And then I had my first child when I was 23. And then priorities shift. What is happiness? And then after I went through that process of becoming a mother, which was a super struggle for me because of how I'm wired, it was challenging. If we're going to be honest about how children are everyone's dream, there are plenty of challenges to becoming a parent, specifically when you have your own trauma, my mother, in the back of your head telling you what to do all the time. So once I had my first child, I decided that I had other aspirations in life that had to do with other things than money, because money I now knew I could create. Like, I can make money. So I came to a conclusion that I felt secure in my ability to create a paycheck. And I still kept wanting to be in the role that I was in for a long time, which was sales. I love sales. I still love sales. I run a business now. I still do my own sales. I love it so much. It's such an interesting, super dynamic profession. It's so much fun. It means that you have to sit with people and read their mind literally every day. It's super exciting. But I never really moved from that position of, so what do I want to do to become more than I am, until I met my current husband, which is just 3 years ago. So I went through a long period where I just worked. I bumped into projects I thought was fun, companies I liked. I did all the different roles. I went into leadership. I tried all of these things. And then 3.5 years ago, when we got together, I started looking at what is happiness really for me. And then it became something very different. How can I be as much of myself as I can be? Which is also what led me to take certain steps when it comes to starting my own business and driving dialogues about the things that actually impacted my past. It took a very long time for me to feel comfortable with myself. So even if it looks on LinkedIn or wherever you look like it's super successful, at the end of the day, I also have 2 diagnosis. I have a lot of mental struggles that I deal with on a daily basis. And I always felt wrong in society. I always felt like I was out of step with reality. I always got feedback from people that was related to that I communicate a certain way, or that I don't understand subtext, or that I don't, all of these things that are chemically for me. I can't do anything about it. So success for me now, today, is to manage my own time, to decide what projects I get to work on, to make money enough, yes, to have a sustainable life, obviously. But the end goal now is not money. The end goal now is to feel good on a daily basis.
I honestly think you're the first person who said you'll still love sales and you didn't end up in them too accidentally, because majority of people, when you ask them about sales or anything to do with sales careers, they will tell you that, oh, I literally just didn't know what to do, so I ended up doing sales because that's the first thing.
They're right, because I did end up in sales by accident, because I went in and asked for a bunch of different jobs. I got a sales job. So that was something that I sort of slipped into. But once I had that first proper job in sales, I haven't left. I've stayed in that. It's 20 years of my career that I have been in that space. I've been in revenue for so many years now. And I think that when the reason why I fell in love with sales was not because of how much money you can make. It was because you sit in situations where you have to read and understand people's psychology. And for me, who's always had challenges reading people because of how I'm shaped, it was a super interesting challenge, because I don't communicate like normal people do. And I mean normative. I don't communicate like most people do. I'm super straightforward. I don't read subtext. I don't understand if you say A and you mean B, I will take you for A. I will think that you mean what you say. And all of of these things was boundaries for me to be good at sales that I wanted to cross over. And it turned out that this was super interesting as a social project for me to understand how people work. And then a couple of years into the career, I realized that, Jesus, this will mean that I will, when the end of my career comes up, I will fully understand people's functions, like how their psychology works. And it's so interesting. So I was accidentally born into sales, and then I stayed.
And what do you think are some common misconceptions about sales that you encountered throughout your career?
I think that it's the Wolf of Wall Street image. I'm sure you can understand what I mean. Sell me this pen and always be closing and all of these 80s methodology. And the problem with it is that it isn't a common misconception. It is what we recruit when it comes to salespeople. We are trying to still recruit a dude who will sell you a pen. And since we are, as an overarching, specifically in SaaS, is very clear, like an industry, that we are still trying to recruit the dude with the pen instead of recruiting really strong, empathetic project leaders, which is what I am when I'm in my sales role. Because I fully believe that the image of a sales rep is perpetuated because of how the industry moves. And I have been working a lot to try to change that image, because the best salespeople that I have worked with, even if I remove myself from that equation, are super introverted blue people who are super good at reading a room and listening to customers and coming with smart ideas and leading the project forward, the process that is the sales process. These are the best salespeople I have worked with. And I can give you an example. I worked with an ERP company, so selling ERP solutions, and they had a person who was VP sales in UK. He came over for a meeting with one of our big accounts. So we were in the meeting, the entire management team was there from their end. We were all sitting around the table. They spent 2.5 hours, and I kid you not, I was new. So I was just sitting there quietly trying to learn. 2.5 hours of demo. So they demoed a platform for 2.5 hours for an entire management team. You know how much money they cost just sitting there? Anyway, so 2.5 hours. And he looks at the CEO, because I'm looking at him, because I'm seeing that he's not saying anything. He's just sitting there observing. So he looks at the CEO, he's like, I think we should take a break. So he sends everyone out. 5 minutes later, he brings everyone back in. And then he says something that was just magic to me. He says, so I heard that it took you this many weeks to implement the new company, when you acquire a new company, to put them on your ERP, so your financial platform. How many people work those weeks to get that company from their platform to the platform you guys have? He was like, yeah, but it's 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, 4 to 6 weeks. How many people? Yeah, it's 3 people. So 3 people full time are working to transfer data manually. This was a while ago, manually over to the new ERP so that they could consolidate the data. He was like, so if I show you that I can do this in 2 minutes, will you proceed and move to our ERP? And the CEO was just like, yes. So he starts a video that he recorded in the pause where he shows click, 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 click. The company is now in your ERP. And the CEO was just like, okay, that's so much money. We acquire like 6 companies a year. So then suddenly the ROI was there. But this is the point, right? So he sat for 2.5 hours listening to the people who was in the room. He broke it. He found one thing. And then he just showed them that. And before he showed them, he asked, would you proceed with us? That's a closing question, by the way. Would you proceed with us if I can show you how to do this in 2 minutes? And they did. One of the biggest accounts that company had. So I think that these are people that doesn't need to take the show. They don't need to stand on the table on a party. They don't need to have all the air in the room. And this is very separate from Wolf of Wall Street or Sell Me the Pen, because these people always want to be in the limelight. The best salespeople I have worked with, is the same with my co-founder and also husband. They are quiet and they listen to a customer. And then they find things to help the customer move in their process. So I really believe we need to shift the idea of what sales should be.
I actually still remember one of the very first interviews that I had after university, because I interviewed for sales jobs before I ended up in recruitment in a very similar career path, because I still think recruitment is sales. But the very first, I can't remember what product I was meant to be selling, but before the interview, there was like 6 of us sitting in the waiting area, like full on Wolf of Wall Street type of setup. And you can hear someone absolutely screaming their lungs out, and like it's full on jumping on a table. Say, oh, I thought someone's having like a physical fight in a room, and they've all walked out all like hyped up, and I was like, I don't think I'm scared to go into that room. I don't know what they're doing there to people. So that's when I realized that that's not environment for me, and that's not the type of sales that I want to do.
No, but right, I agree. And this is the point, because that environment that you just described, the bullpen, the whatever we want to call it, it excludes 80% of all people and their personalities. Because people who are like me, people who are like you, people who are not alpha male, they don't want to be there. They're like, no, this is not for me. Because why would we want to be there? It sounds super toxic and very, very discriminatory. I want to be in this group over here where they don't shout at each other to get dopamine. And I've been in that bullpen environment for many years since I worked as an account executive and an SDR earlier in my career. And I never really had a problem with it, but I saw people who did, and they left the team because they would be there 3 months and they would be like, no, they would have been great in the sales role. That wasn't the point. The point was that the culture really is only for a certain small type of person. And I don't like that. I'm for inclusivity. And I look at bottom line numbers and equal teams, so 50-50 men, women. And when it comes to diversity, where do you come from? What perspectives do you have? All of these things. The more mixed the team is, the better the results are bottom line. The more they sell. It's the same with female leadership. If you look at the studies that Gartner has done as an example, sales teams that are led by females have a higher percentage of attainment of quota. That's just data. It's not a discussion anymore. So we are better leaders and diverse teams are better at delivering quota and budget. That's just how it is. And then we have the whole group of people who's like, but that's not true. That's your opinion. You don't need to give it. The data says everything.
And have you ever, especially in your early career, had to justify the reasons when you came for an interview and gave your CV, why you didn't go to university at that time, why you already how come you have already 4 years of experience, or people were more open with that?
It was easier for me 20 years ago. Unfortunately, based on how the market has moved, I still believe that wanting a universal or an education from university is something in certain roles that is really not required. It's really not. So the idea that some companies stop you if you haven't gone to university is stupid. They're missing competence. That's just what happens. And it's very unfortunate because looking at how I hire, and I have hired for plenty of teams throughout my career as well, I don't care if you went to university or not. I care about how moldable you are and how your experience has been. It doesn't matter that you've gone to university, but for me, I'm a unique person there. Most managers are looking for the wrong things because going to the university, the only thing you should take away from university is the ability to learn new things, because it's a great school for learning things, right? It's a great school for how to learn for yourself. But the idea that this is still important when YouTube is filled with videos on how to do basically anything. It's interesting. My daughter, she's 17. She knows how to operate Canva. Canva is a design tool. She could go to Fiverr right now, which is a consultancy platform, and get paid gigs. She's 17. So what she needs from university is completely irrelevant. She will probably still go, but what she will learn there, she can learn online. She doesn't need a university degree. And I believe that school, how it looks today, will be shattered over the coming years because they can't deliver the same way that we need them to deliver when we have plenty of people in a certain generation who doesn't want to leave their home, who wants to train at home, and who has the same skill sets trained from YouTube than you can get in school. So then the point of school in itself without the social interaction sort of goes away. So it will be interesting to follow sort of how this progresses. But university degree in all its glory, and I have university points too. I've taken courses throughout my career on different topics that I'm interested in, but it's never been something that I have focused on because I learn what I want to learn when I want to learn it, which is today or tomorrow. I don't need to go to school for that. Not today anyway.
One of the things that I found it hard to admit for quite a long time, because I went to university because of very traditional upbringing from my side. I grew up knowing that I have to finish high school, then I have to go to university, then the husband comes in, then the house, then the kids, and then very, very traditional. But from university perspective, I really wanted to take a gap year and travel and actually figure out what I want to do. So I ended up getting into history of art and politics, and I have nothing to do with history or art. So during my first year of uni, I fell asleep in every single lecture, I think. I barely passed it because I was just so bored. I ended up doing finance, and even now I like, out of all of the courses that I learned, because I was working full-time as well to support myself at the same time, out of those studies, I think I remember like maybe 2 or 3 lectures and like the skills that I learned just because I wasn't that excited about this. But when I realized how my brain works in general, I learned that I can learn things extremely quickly. Just get me excited about them.
Yes. And I function the same way. I think that that's one of the points, because the social aspect of university is great. You will make friends. If you go to university and you go there physically, you will make friends. That's just how it works, because you're crammed together in a topic and you're going to spend time together. So you will make friends. What I think was the lesson that I had, because I already knew how to learn things, because I've been reading so much. So this is one of the things that we discuss a lot when it comes to CVs for people when we hire people. It's more relevant to me that this person reads 2 books a month now than that they went to school before. So did you pick up any habits of consuming information ongoingly? Because this is the thing, I got a questions about this a couple of years ago in one of the pods that I was part of. They were like, but how much do you consume a week then? It's like, I don't know, 10 articles at least on whatever topic is piquing my interest right now, 2 books, 4 podcasts. So every time I go to the gym, I listen to pod, probably an hour long each. All of those are in business right now because I have a business, like a period right now where I'm very interested in the business part. And then I also consume political content a lot. So that's a normal week. And for most people, it's like, but that's insane. Not really, because my brain wants to grow. I want my mind to grow. And I love consuming. So why wouldn't I consume a lot? Because when I work, when I create content, when I lead my teams, all of these things, it makes me smarter to be able to deliver to all of these aspects of my life. It's the same when it comes to being a parent. I've read so much about being a parent because I had no role models. I grew up with a mother who was insane. Like I have no one to go on to be like, oh, I should be like my mom. It's like the option was I should really not be like my mom. How do I build other structures to not be like her? Again, I sound like I hate my mom. I do not. She did the best she could with the tools she had. She had no help. She was mentally ill. Like this is just bad luck. We were just unlucky. That's how I see it. But when it comes to luck, it's also very related to what you decide to do with your life. Because when it comes to everything that I have dove into, and I've had plenty of projects that I just jump feet first, like let's go. And I've had to learn as I have gone into a new role. Like as now, I will say in an interview, yes, I will learn this, and they were like, yeah, but you're starting in a month. I was like, oh, you don't know how much I can learn in a month. And then I will come in and I know more than their senior A's because I just consumed for a month and just read on the industry, talked to buyers, like understood exactly what they're doing. And it's so thrilling. I never want to stop working like this because it means that my world is just expanding every day.
That's one of the reasons why I started having this podcast is the more you speak with people as well, the more information you get. And I think the wider your world becomes around you.
Yes.
And there's so
Yes,
many different
100%.
aspects. To me, hyper focus and learning new things is I get through extremes of, I went through, I think, almost a year of consuming every possible podcast about religion to a level where now people think that I'm extremely religious person because I know way more than you possibly can think
You
of.
know everything that you could find. I understand that. And I did a similar journey when I was 15, 16. I went through all the religions. I read the Quran, the Bible, like every scripture I could find because I was trying to figure out, is this something for me? It ended up with me being an atheist. So no, I didn't find anything that fitted me. But what I found was an understanding for why people get attracted to religion. And these are insights that are hard to get unless you get super invested in a topic, right?
Coming back to sales, one quick question that I just thought of. When it comes to interviewing people, obviously you're not looking for a standard hardcore person who's going to cut everyone's throat to get the sale.
No,
How do you
no.
test people during interview process, and how do you make sure they are the right fit for the sales that you're building?
So there are 2 aspects of this because it sort of depends what role I'm hiring for. So if I'm hiring for a person who's supposed to book meetings, SDR, for mid-market, or I'm hiring a person who is an account executive who's supposed to close the deals in mid-segment, that's one type of skill sets that we need. If I'm looking for enterprise people, enterprise sales and enterprise SDRs, it's a completely different setup from a skills perspective. So if we take the first piece that has to do with personality traits, or rather behavior, how your mind is, your experience, I always ask in interviews, what trauma have you gone through? They don't even have to answer me detailed. I can see it on them. If they have trauma, they will think about it and I can see it in their eyes. Like something happened to you, something that shaped you to be a person who's sitting in front of me now, which means that you are now stronger. You are more in tune with yourself. You have learned more about yourself because you're sitting here in front of me trying to pursue a job that will require a lot of you. You're probably pretty hungry. You need to prove yourself. And you have very little support in most cases, because that's the type of trauma I'm talking about. When you were abandoned as a child, or you lost your parents, or something bad happened to you for no fault of your own. And these people always get a topper ranking for me, because people without trauma they will have a hard time having the perseverance that you require and the patience you require. Because if you have never gone through hardship, and good on you if you haven't, I'm happy for you, because this is not something I wish on anyone. But if you haven't gone through any trauma, any hardship, it's very hard to go into a role where you will get a lot of no's, you will get rejected a lot, you will need patience, you will need to expand your skill sets, you will need to do a lot of things, and it can take on your on your self-esteem to be in this role in the beginning. So trauma trumps non-traumatic experiences. I also look at and talk about their favorite books, because again, I want people who read, because if they read, they will consume the books that I give them, because I always have for my team, I have a weekly book. So you read this book, we discuss on Fridays. That has always been part of my team when I run sales teams. The second part has to do with curiosity. Because this is a key factor, a key skill set that needs to be there for you to succeed in basically any role, but in sales it's vital. So curiosity. If I have an online interview like we're doing now, and we're doing an interview for a sales position, I will count the questions I get asked. So questions they have asked me, how many questions? And if we're below 30 questions that interview, you're not curious enough. I want follow-up questions. I want, why do you do it that way? I don't fully understand. Can you explain to me? I want all of these things that shows that you're not afraid to look dumb. You're curious to understand, and the curiosity to understand trumps your ego and your face. That's what I want. So these are like hygienic factors when it comes to proceeding with someone further into the recruitment process, to have them do cases, and then the cases are based on which segment they are going to target, right? Because again, enterprise versus SMB and mid-segment, it's a completely different beast. You need so many different skills that you don't need in mid-segment as a salesperson. So that's what I look for.
What is the biggest difference?
The biggest difference is that when you work mid-segment, you will work on 2 to 3 to 4 to 500 accounts on a quarterly basis. So you will target so many different companies. When you work enterprise, you will target 10 accounts per 6 months, and you will learn everything about that account. You will know their business better than they know their business. And then you will come with insights, and you will drive a process that involves 15 people. You're a project lead to the T. And you are also very skilled in industry. You need to be super understanding of their day-to-day situation. You need to read at annual reports. You need to do your research. You need to create maybe places for these accounts to meet each other. It's a whole different game, because you're targeting so few companies. So the account-based marketing and the account-based sales that we do now for Break the Box, that I'm working, the company that I run with my co-founder, the account-based marketing we're doing now, it's 20 accounts. We will target and penetrate them, get the meeting before the year ends. We're not going to assume that we will close a deal with any of them. We will get the meeting before the year ends. So we have 3 months to get the meeting with these accounts. And we are multi-threading them, and we're talking to all levels in the organization. And we're now trying to build a business case around why they should work with us. While compared to being an SMB salesperson, you will cold call, you will have 5 meetings a day, and you will close out of 20 deals, you will close 1. With enterprise, you're supposed to have a much higher win rate. So of these 20, 30 accounts, you're supposed to close 12 of them into deals. So it's a very different game.
How did the sales style in general changed over years?
Too little.
Too little?
Too little. It's changed too little. So if you look at just the last couple of years, AI sort of threw in a bomb into the sales organizations all over the world. And one of the things that we see with AI, which is a result I was expecting, because I talked about AI in sales like 5-6 years ago, because I knew it was coming. You can see the trends in the industry, how this was growing. And then ChatGPT came in and just disrupted the entire industry. But what we can see with tools, AI tools in sales, is that we have now magnified the bad sales process we have. We have bad outreach, sending out cold emails and cold outreach when it comes to calling and LinkedIn. And we are now able to do 10 times as much outreach with the same poor process. So looking at the last couple of years, we can just see how organizations who were bad before are just bad at scale now. So we have a bunch of new skill sets that sales organizations needs to teach their salespeople to do. One skill set is mentalizing. Gartner talks a lot about this a lot. They did a lot of surveys, like 100,000 sales reps all over the world. So mentalizing is the ability to paint a story in your mind and then have the customer see that story with you. So painting an idea of what the project will be and what the success points will be in a way that feels alive for the prospect. Mentalizing is super powerful. It's very based on storytelling and is something that most salespeople are never trained in. They can learn how to do it. No one has just trained them. Second part has to do with AI collaboration. So having a salespeople today means that you need to teach them how to prompt AI in a good way, which is a skill that didn't exist 2 years ago. It's a completely new skill. There is no mention of this skill in any ads for salespeople. So when companies recruit, this is not there. Because they don't even know how to recruit for this.
I think companies still pretend that AI doesn't exist. And I was laughing a couple of days ago that when I started in my career, people used to say, it was like, oh, don't Google things. Google doesn't stay. You need to learn different ways. And I was like, well, look at us now. We have Google. And I keep hearing the same thing. I was like, oh, AI is not going to stay. So don't worry about implementing it and about it in general. We're like, well, it's definitely staying. That's for sure. It's just...
Oh, yes.
How we're going to work with it.
No, but we will always have we talk about early adapters and laggards, right? We will always have the people at the back who's like, but this is dangerous and I shouldn't touch it and I don't know what to do. And what they're really saying is, I don't know how to learn this, so I'm scared now. That's really what they're saying. And I can understand the skepticism to AI, but I am also a firm believer, and this is interesting because I wrote in my book on SDR work that AI will take your job. You need to prepare so you can move to another role. Like this is now, and this book was published a year ago. So this is happening now. We can see SDRs and BDRs in AI format with voice who can do the same job as an SDR. So this is definitely here to stay. But I think that one of the challenges is that if you are a person who wants to stay in sales, you need to become so much more than a traditional sales role. You need to be great at content. You need to build your own personal brand. You need to be an industry expert. You need to create content for video. You need to work on AI prompting. You need to have a social media presence. You need data analytics. You need software for your product. Like all of these things is something that is super required.
And what would you tell to people who still say that cold calling has always been here and it's going to stay? What is your thoughts on cold calling and cold outreach?
I love that you asked this. I've been in so many fights on LinkedIn the last couple of months on this topic.
Probably one of the most common themes with recruiters among them is like one side is very against cold calling and one side is like, oh my God, you're not going to survive without picking the phone and randomly calling to a manager who doesn't even have a phone.
No, I know. And this is, the thing is, again, I love cold calling. I love the act. Like I find this super interesting. I love it so much. I was always one of the top bookers in every role I've ever had because I'm so good at it, right? So when I started realizing a couple of years ago, like this is not going to keep happening because this is not effective, I started running some experiments on this. Since I always book my own meetings, the last year specifically when I started running this business with my co-founder. So since I keep doing it and I'm creating my own pipe, I kept cold calling. And then I started comparing because I also run 2 teams. I'm also CMO/CRO. I'm also trying to recruit people. I'm doing too many things for me to be able to sit down and just call. So I started doing experiments that led me to believe that if I work on social media, LinkedIn, I comment on people's posts that are in my account and the accounts I want to reach. I publish about 35 posts a week. If I do that weekly. So I have a scheduling slot. I publish all my content that I've created, and I do it a lot with the help of AI. And then I just schedule it, so it's done. So if I just stay on LinkedIn daily while I do all the other things I need to do, I book average 8 meetings a week. If I would sit and cold call to get the same work done, to book the same amount of meetings, I would have to call every day that week, full time. And it's not efficient because who has the time? It's so much more efficient to work the way I did. So I actually did a post a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I have to put my head down now. Like cold calling is actually dead. In the current format, it's not working. It's not efficient. So when I say cold calling is dead, what I mean is bad cold calling, where you have no social media presence, no personal brand, and no ICP match, it's not going to be efficient. It's not worth the money you pay the sales rep because it's more expensive to pay them than what you get out from the pipeline. So if they book the amount of meetings they do, you won't even have the money to cover their salary when they work like this. It's not worth it. So that's the end line here. It's not dead, it's just badly done. And if we keep doing it the way we're doing it now, there is no reason for AI to not replace SDRs.
I saw a very interesting, just before we actually got on a call today, I
Yeah.
didn't get to the actual details of the post, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think in the middle of October, Google is launching almost like a filter on their Gmail accounts that is going to be almost impossible to reach someone if you don't have them in contact. The whole post came through, oh, what we're going to do with this, how we're going to survive on cold outreach.
And it's an interesting question, because what it actually means, because I read 15 articles about this 2 weeks ago when they dropped. So I have read, because this is something that started already last month, because they started pulling out spam filters to be harsher, right? So what I learned when I read through all of these articles to try to understand what to do with my outreach through my team, because I don't use mail a lot, I don't use phone a lot, I only use LinkedIn. But my team does outreach traditionally. Calling, emailing, and LinkedIn, right? They use all. And when I looked at it, I was like, great. So we need to stop tracking emails, because a tracking pixel will be picked up as spam by Google now. We need to stop having links in emails. We even removed the link in the signature, because that link, to the website, that link is a link. Google doesn't care if it's a link in your signature or if it's a link like in the email. And we removed sending videos, that is links. So everything that is trackable, we need to use plain text, because if you use plain text, you have a very high likelihood of ending up in the inbox, not in the spam box. And if you use other things, imagery, links, and documents in the first email, you will get sent to spam. So this means that we can't rely on email outreach anymore. Cold calling doesn't work efficiently. And also, just to be clear, buyers don't want the cold calls. If we're going to listen to buyers at one point or another, they don't want it. So if we're going to respect our buyers, then we should let them not receiving this, because they don't want it. So many decision makers are telling us in sales very clearly, please don't call me. They don't want to be called. They want valuable messaging on LinkedIn. They want valuable communication. They want valuable conversations, like between people on LinkedIn. They want text messages, preferably to phone. Like they prefer text, because they choose when to engage. And we are ongoingly in sales, last 10, 15 years, we try to force people to have conversations they don't want to have. And the buyers are fed up to hear. So maybe we should just respect this, and maybe we should look at a different way of doing it. And the way I do it, and the way that my team does it on LinkedIn when it comes to what they do on LinkedIn, is that we are positioning ourselves as experts within a specific field. I'm only talking to founders and revenue leaders in SaaS. That's my niche, that's my ICP. All the content I made have to do with things they are struggling with. And I free and willingly share my knowledge. I get a lot of connection requests based on these posts. And then when they send a connection request, I accept it. And I'm like, hey, what's up? How can I help you? That's how I book my meetings.
I still remember a few calls that I made before in my career. And one of the calls was, it's a very reputable company, but the person answered the phone and she was like, did you actually read the whole job description that you're calling about? And I was like, yes, of course. I'm not going to say that I didn't read to the end, because it was like too long and I already had the number in the list of the numbers that I need to call. And then she was like, no, you didn't. She hung up and I was like, what on earth? I went to the job advert, and at the very bottom it said, we do work with recruiters, but you have to contact us, you have to submit the candidate's profile, add all of the details, and write your fee straight with it. If you try to email us outside of this, you might get blocked, but not necessarily, depending on the quality of the candidate. If you call us, you automatically get blocked from everyone in the business. And I was like, oh shit, I should have listened to read the thing before. But it really showed me that what you're talking about, that you shouldn't call if they don't want to, and they keep telling you don't call, and we're still calling.
Yes. And the thing is, most people that are working in cold calling or in the industry, they will claim, yeah, but it works still. Yes, but the fact that it works because you got lucky 2 times a day to talk to someone doesn't mean that it's efficient. Like I can do something that works sometimes and say, but it still works. Yeah, but if you would have spent those 4 hours doing what I do, you would have booked 5 meetings instead of 1 out of the 2 conversations you had. So my way is more efficient. And for some reason, people still don't want to let it go. And I think it's super interesting, because one of the challenges, I've trained a lot of salespeople in social selling, and this was already back in 2016, 2017. One of the biggest thresholds people had was how poor they were in writing like a person Like you go from talking like we're talking now, and then they will sit and write an email, and it's super corporate. Like it's super, hello, dear Mr. Blah, blah, blah. It's super corporate. Like, I hope this email finds you well. Like, dude, come on, no one speaks like this. Can we speak like people? So one of the things that we keep coming back to when we do trainings for sales teams in customer cases is that we keep coming back to, so how do you speak? So say what you want to say out loud and write it down word by word, so we can start seeing a personality in your communication in writing. And people are super bad at copy. People are overall bad at writing copy. And this is a trainable skill.
Being bad at copy, I think it's part of education that we had, because like it was drilled in my brain that I have to start every single email, dear sir or madam. And it took me like not a decade, about 5 years in a corporate to actually get to the point. I was like, I don't need to say dear sir and madam when I'm asking is like, are you ready for lunch? Like it's not how it
No,
works.
it's not necessary. And another thing that I can also connect to what I was saying before, when you read a lot, you're better at writing. This is just correlation. Like when you read a lot, you are better at writing. So when I started writing articles, I had the vocabulary that I had, and English is my second language. All the fake copy I write is in English. The book I wrote was in English. It's my second language. My vocabulary is huge because I read books in English. It's so big. I have so many terminologies that people will be like, what does it mean? It's like, yeah, it means this, don't you know? And the reason why is because my library in my head is so huge. And I think the more we consume written material, the better we become at writing, because we also see other people's way of writing and we find our own tonality. But it's very much a practice thing. And it's the same when you drive conversations. LinkedIn DMs, as an example, it's not an email inbox. It's a messaging inbox. It's like chatting with someone over Facebook Messenger. You're not supposed to have a best regards your name, because you're instant chatting. It's not an official channel. So when my intro message is, hey, what's popping, which is super uncorporate, and then how can I help you? Because if you want my help, I'm here. And if you don't, and you just want to ask me questions, or you just want to tell me I had a good post or whatever, I'm not going to try to sell you. Because you are coming to me, I will ask if I can help. Because this is how normal people interact. I had a great example. My husband gave me this as an example, which was so spot on. Like, let's say that you're going to plan a date, like you're going to meet your friend for a beer, and you want them to meet you at the place and whatever, so you want to send them the details. You won't send a message that is like, do you want to go take a beer with me? 3 out of 5 of my friends says that taking a beer with me is 5 stars or more. Like, this is not how you pitch, let's go grab a beer. But for some reason, no, but seriously, for some reason, salespeople will be like, yeah, so would you like to take a meeting? By the way, we got great reviews on Product Hunt. Like, dude, who cares? Tell me what you want to meet about. And if you just told your friend beer, they would just be like, when do you need me and where should I go? Like, this is not complicated. So we're making it so hard that sales reps are very confused. And I understand why they are. I got confused too when people started pushing to me how I should behave in sales interactions. When I had my first proper manager, which was 2010 maybe, when I had my first software job in sales, he started telling me that I needed to dress in a skirt and a kawaii, like a blazer, because I was dressed like this and I have tattoos everywhere. Like, this is so he was like, but you need to dress up, you need to dress the part. I was like, what do you mean dress the part? I'm fine. I have the highest win rate in the company. Like, what do you mean? He was like, yeah, but you will see, you will close more deals if you just have a suit on. Dude, I will be so uncomfortable in a suit. And anyway, so he made a bet. I was like, I will do this if you pay for my clothes, and I won't hire commission on the deals that I close without those clothes on. And then we did the deal, and it turned out that my win rate went down the 2 weeks I wore his clothes. It went down for a simple reason. I was uncomfortable. So when I was uncomfortable, the sales meetings became about how I was feeling in the moment. Before, I felt fine because I knew exactly what I was doing. And then I was there in my suit and I was like, oh, I don't know, this is super, it just didn't work. So then he let me continue dressing however I wanted to be dressed. But this is a clear example. Like, when you get instructions that are so far away from who you are as a person, you will perform worse. So why would we want our salespeople to all dress and act the same? Why? Especially if what they're doing is not working well. Like, people try to mimic me because I was the top performer in most of the roles I had. I always sold like 100% more than everyone else. And I had so much many more meetings and I had so much many bookings unshakable bookings because I was also super invested. I'm a very enthusiastic person. Like when I do something, I do it all day, every day, a lot. Like, so when the people were trying to use terminology I used in meetings, speak the way I did because they were trying to copy certain phrases, it fell completely flat because of your voice. You're not me. You can't copy paste my personality. So taking a phrase that I use a lot is not something that's going to help you sell more, because it will feel fake coming from you, because the person who can carry this sentence is me. So when I tried sort of teaching people, I stopped teaching them how to do phraseology, and we started doing other activities. So one of the competitions that me and my coworker had, because we were doing this, he was ongoingly trying to catch me when it came to budget. I was like, okay, let's do a test. So we will do a competition. We do one discovery meeting each, and we will count the number of times we both ask a why question. So we will count, and the person who asks the most why questions will win, because asking why and trying to understand is a big part of succeeding in sales, right? And he did the meeting, I did my meeting, we did it online, both of us, so we recorded, and he had 12 why questions. And I had 54 in a half an hour session. 54 times I just asked, but why? But why? But why are you doing it that way? But why are you doing that? Why do you want to achieve that? Why? So there are takeaways from these things that has to do with what to infuse into salespeople. And the reason why I asked so many questions of why was because I wanted to know. I wasn't trying to close the deal. It wasn't a strategy. I just wanted to understand, because that's my curiosity. So training that in action is super effectful in a sales team. So if you're a sales leader listening to this, tell your team that you're competing on why now, and just ask them to ask it 50 times every meeting. I swear to you that your win rates will go up, because they will understand so much more what the customer needs.
One topic that I also want to touch, Sara, is neurodivergency in career in general. Could you share your experience of navigating the workplace as someone who is neurodivergent, and how that's impacted your career journey?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that neurodivergency overall we need to talk about more in workplaces, because it's so impactful to how you perform in a team. It just impacts everything, right? So I have both worked with a lot of managers who've had ADHD as an example, and I am also, again, bipolar and borderline. So both of these diagnoses I have in a nice comix of things. And both of these diagnoses for me has always been, I'm very emotional, proud of it, but I'm very emotional. So my emotions will go like this during a day, like a lot, which means that I am a storm to be around, sometimes a happy storm, sometimes a very sad storm. And it requires a certain type of leadership for me to function and to feel well in the work environment. I have gotten this leadership maybe 2 times in my career. The rest of the time I have not. So I have been forced to sort of lead myself, because when it comes to neurodivergency, there are a few things that managers need to do in their workplace. Number one, have open conversations about this in the group. Talk about neurodivergency, not pointing people out, but talk about it as a concept, how that impacts. We can also see in sales teams, as an example, Gartner, again, released data on this, that we have a high percentage number of people who are neurodivergent in sales teams, because the speed of that gig is perfectly fitted for people who are a bit more creative and a bit more speedy than people who are neurotypical. But it requires a leadership to understand how to lead people who are like that. Otherwise, they will be very likely be burnt out or go into depression or get on sick leave, right? Because you can burn this type of person quickly in both ends unless you help them maintain a healthy balance between work and their life. Leadership-wise, we need to have conversations about it. We need to openly talk about how neurodivergency can impact the workplace. Then your team members, once you've had that first conversation, will probably come to you. Some of them you might go to because you can see that something is going on. Because you have, in a team of 10, you have 2-3 people who are neurodivergent. They just are, like statistically. And this is across the world. So out of 10 people in the team, 2-3 people have something. So let's imagine that almost half of your team has something. Let's try to provide for them, because we also require different things depending on which diagnosis you have. And also in the diagnosis, depending on which type of where on the spectrum you are, right? Because an autistic person requires one thing, while a bipolar or borderline requires a very different thing, versus ADHD, who requires a third thing. So you need, as a manager, to read on to these common diagnoses, just deep dive a bit on each of them, and try to understand how to better lead a person. Because an ADHD person, as an example, my daughter, my oldest, has ADHD pretty severely. And what she runs on is dopamine, and what her brain lacks is dopamine. So when you have an adult person, I've had managers who are like this, an adult person who runs on dopamine, but they have a lack of dopamine. So they produce less dopamine than people who don't have ADHD. That means that they often end up in paralysis, which means that they don't do anything. They just sit and stare, like they're just dead to the world for an hour. You can't really connect with them. Number two, they have spins where they go in and they do everything. So an ADHD person will wait until it's 2 minutes before the guests will arrive before they clean everything. And they will go for a week having anxiety, wanting to clean, but they can't get themselves to do that because of lack of dopamine. But so many people have no idea how these things work. So the lack of dopamine is a clear thing that relates to how can I create dopamine kicks every day for a person in my team who has ADHD to keep them going. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at gamification, you can look at how to reward them. They need reward systems. And many adults who hasn't been diagnosed, but that has ADHD, they don't know this themselves even. You can go into a person who's not diagnosed yet, say, maybe we should try this. You see the results and you're like, oh, this person now performs 120% better. And all I did was buy gold stars and put them on the desk when something went well. That's all you did. And this is like super tiny things that makes a huge difference for that person to not feel wrong. Because a lot of people who are neurodivergent feels wrong. A lot of people don't have the courage to talk about it because there is shame connected to it. So I think that one of the challenges that we will see, because you can look at as an example in Sweden, 50% of every school class between the age of 8 to 12, I think it is, half of every class. So if we have a class of 25 children, we have 12 and a half people on average who has something diagnosed, like actually diagnosed. That's more than half, that's almost half the class. So since that is the case, we need to have a work environment that provides for these people to be the best they can be. Because if they don't get that support, they will continue feeling bad emotionally and mentally, and they will very likely burn out. There is a high suicide rate in people who are neurodivergent, specifically on the bipolar side. It's one of the worst diagnoses you can have, because a big bulk of us who have this diagnosis will attempt suicide through teenage years and young adults. It's not a superpower, even though I have been lucky enough to have a job that fits my diagnosis. But there are so many downsides to these diagnoses, and we can do with so little effort at workplaces, we can make the lives of these people and people like me so much easier. But we need to educate ourselves.
I think one interesting thing that you touched on as well, that a lot of people are not diagnosed. So you might have more people than you think you have with neurodivergency on your team, but they're not diagnosed and they don't know what help they might need. And actually spotting those things is quite important, because I personally been diagnosed at the age of 27 with the ADHD. And that day it was like, it's very weird feeling when it's like, it makes sense. Like 90% of my life now makes sense. Why I was laughing when you were saying that you can literally procrastinate 90% of your time, and then when the deadline kicks in, that's your anxiety goes the highest to the high, and then you do everything in 5 minutes and you're like, okay, I'm bored now again, so I'm going to play some random game for like 5 hours and then until my next deadline comes in.
No, I love that so much. I'm sorry, this is so interesting because my daughter has the same type of things. I have had managers who had the same thing too. I think the most interesting aspect of ADHD is the waiting space. I don't know if you recognize this. So I have a meeting in 3 hours that I'm gonna go to physically. I will just sit and wait now. Like I can't do anything. I will just sit. I will play my game on she has Tetris and stuff. I will play my game, but I won't move, and I won't do anything else until the meeting, because I want to make sure I get there on time, and I will be there half an hour before to make sure that I am on time, or I will forget and I will be 2 hours late. Like there's no in between. And I find this super interesting because one of the things that I did with one of our managers who had the same challenge, he would go into waiting mode, right? So we had an important meeting in the afternoon, he would go into waiting mode. So what I would do, I would be like, so can we look at activities to do until the meeting is going to happen? So I brought him things that I needed him to approve. I introduced, he told me yes or no, that I did the next thing. So we sort of utilized that time anyway, but he was still sitting there in waiting mode. but I sort of delivered decision points that he could make decisions on, so I could proceed with things I wanted. So I knew that every time we have a big important meeting, this will happen, so I will use that time to get approval for my stuff. Is that something you can relate to, the waiting?
Yes, waiting is, I can relate quite a lot, but I normally try to position my calendar in a way that it doesn't seem like I'm waiting for a meeting. So I'm
Right.
kind of creating myself an illusion that there's a meeting and then there's another meeting. So
Right.
I'm going from one to another and I don't have time. Even that meeting is with me doing something. So that's one way for me. I think the one that I really struggle in is probably the funniest one to me. Like, I cannot start anything unless it's a time and my watch shows either 0 or a 5. So if it's like 12 minutes past 7, I'm not going to stand up from here until quarter past or
You know,
half
now
past.
it's too late. Now it's too late
Yeah,
because you missed
and
the
if I
window of
miss,
the 5.
yeah, and if I had that today where I was like, okay, I'm going to do something at quarter to, and I missed it by 1 minute, and I was like, oh damn, I have to wait now till it got to the 0 hour, and that's the one that I actively know, but I can't. I realized that when it's too late already, and I was like, oh, I just literally sat and played my phone for 15 minutes
because if you have a manager who knows these things, he can address you in a certain way, right? Because I have, as an example, since I am so all over the place in primarily my borderline, my bipolar is pretty dormant, right? Like the last couple of years. I think it's because I'm getting older, because it has a tendency of becoming dormant as you get older. But my borderline in self, the action is, so something small will happen. I will get pissed, like angry out of my mind. Like angry, I want to beat the wall angry for a split second. Like so angry for a random small tiny thing, right? So let's say that my nostril spray is out and I get super angry. And then I will sit for like half a minute, be like, I'm fine. And then it passes. But I will also have facial expressions because I get overwhelmingly angry. And it's not related to what happened. This is chemistry. I can't help it. So when I have meetings with customers sometimes, and this was also when I was younger and when I had managers, but when I have meetings with customers, someone will say something that is so unnervingly stupid. And I will be like cold calling isn't that. So someone will say that and my brain will just be like, oh my God, are you insane? And then I will breathe. And my co-founder, we are often doing meetings together. He will just look at me and then he will take over the conversation. And this is the point. So if he was my manager, he would have seen that and he would have distracted the room, because my anger peak has nothing to do with people in the room or whatever they said. It's not something, again, it's a chemical wave that I can't do anything about. So these are the things that we as managers can support with if we know them. And we can mitigate conflict, we can make sure that people feel well, and being adaptive to what you need, as an example, which is that if you miss the meeting start at 12, we need to start the meeting at 12:15 instead.
Because otherwise, I'm just going to sit there and just be like, nah, I can't think now. Like, I need to wait. I laugh at this myself, but I at the same time, it's quite a nice conversation starter when you say, it's like, I can't really move right now. Like, give me 10 minutes to do that. But when it comes to your diagnosis specifically, I'm sorry, I don't know too much about it. How can other managers, and people listening could support either the staff or colleagues who have the diagnosis that you have?
Yeah, so when it comes to bipolar, if you're going to summarize it basically, is that we live in 3 different states. So one state is super depressive. Like everything is sad, everything is horrible, everything is bad. A depressive state, basically. How you would see the world if you were in the deep-seated depression. The middle phase is neutral, which happens a lot for bipolar people. It goes very much cycles over the year. And the third step is manic. And manic is a stage where I will, for 2-3 days, I will work 14 hours a day, super well. I work super well. I will also spend those nights cleaning my wardrobe with a toothbrush. When I was because I am super manic. I'm very, very high strung, speak fast. I'm good at doing productive things like emailing stuff. I'm not great at listening. I'm very exaggerated in my way of being. When I was younger, these periods also contain destructive behavior. So destructive drinking, sexual destructive behavior, all of these things that has to do with being self-destructive. It's very common with self-harm and stuff like that when you are in your teenage years and young adults, right? As a manager, manager to understand that your person is going into what we call is a period we call a SCOV, that you're going into one of these means that you need to address it with the team member. So I can now see that you have been awake at 12 every night on Slack. When are you sleeping? This is a typical question to ask. No, but seriously. And it's the same with people who are not diagnosed who get burnt out. They will be online every hour of the day. This is not healthy. So we need to break it and put a break on it, right? So having a communication when your team member is acting strangely in any way will give you an indication to maybe something is going on for them. And then we need a conversation as soon as possible. The idea, this is not my problem, is a bad idea, because it will become your problem when the person goes on sick leave. So it will become a problem for you. So try to manage this as early as you can. I don't think there's anything else really to do when it comes to bipolar, because these situations are so extreme. What needs to happen is that person needs support from mental health care. So this is something where you can talk to the employee, your team member, about, are you getting help? Can we provide help with psychological care through the company? Is there options to do a program for this? Like, what can you do to just show them you support? Because plenty of companies will actually pay for mental health care if they are aware of this in their statutory. They will have pockets for this, but we need to be aware and we need to talk to our employees about it. But this is not something that a manager can really help with, because it's such a chemical condition, right? You need medication and you need therapy and support and programs and stuff like that. So what you can do as a leader is to encourage that to happen for the employee, and also to provide support and links. And here are websites you can look at to sort of behave like a supporting agent for them to take the help they need or go and seek the help they need. And if they don't do that, you can't really do anything more, because you can't force the person, unfortunately, to get help. So that's on the bipolar side. So be observant to changes in behavior and understand that when it happens, it's time to quickly take a conversation about how are you feeling, what is going on, and then observe and then advise based on how the person's behavior is. So if you're very hyper and manic, then you need to go home, take sleeping pills and sleep it off for a couple of days. So you should give that person 2 days off to be able to break the pattern of getting higher and higher and higher. Because at the end of this, you either crash or you get psychotic, which is bad. My mother had that happen to her ongoingly because no one was helping her, which is why many people who have mental illness, they don't get help. It just gets worse. So having an open conversation is important. For borderline, it's different, because borderline is hard to deal with, even as the person who has it. My husband also has borderline. My daughter also has borderline. So we're an entire neurospicy family, right? And when you have borderline, basically what happens is that you are like this all day, every day. So you will go from the lowest of low, the angriest of angriest, to the happiest that you have ever been in your entire life, back to sad, back to happy, back to sad. So I am a roller coaster to be around. And my managers, what they have done, the ones that have been good, is that they have said, Sarah, I think you need 2 minutes now to calm down. I was like, I think you're right. And then I would go away and take 2 minutes to breathe. But that worked with me because I was aware. When you are a person who's not aware, when you don't have the diagnosis, you don't know what's going on, you just feel wrong, then a conversation would rather be, have you considered that maybe this is something you need to get help with? Should we get a remiss for you so you can go and get some support? Maybe we should do an utredning. Maybe we should support you in this. Because at the end of the day, what these people need most of the time is help. Because mental conditions are, when left unkept and unmanaged, it becomes dangerous to the person who has it.
I think one interesting analogy I heard about borderline personality in specific, where someone was trying to explain how it looks like without touching the mental health. And the description that I had was, imagine someone being in extremely toxic relationship where on the best day you're feeling extremely loved, you're literally at the highest of the high, and that's the love of your life. On the other day you're thinking of how to run away and you don't want to see this person again. So that was a very easy example.
It's a great description if you also add the premise that you are in this relationship with yourself. Because that's the whole point, right? It's you are in a relationship with yourself that is toxic and wonderful at the same time. Like it just goes back and forth between. Because the person that you are toxic with is often yourself. Many people who have borderline, as an example, will be expressive. They will have behaviors out externalized. But many women who have borderline are very internalized. So that's why women get diagnosed differently. because we turn it inwards. So we turn it into ourselves. We start hating on ourselves instead. So when we have anger, we turn it in. We don't start shouting on the streets in most cases. We shout on ourselves inside our own heads. While men, overarchingly, are more aggressive outwards, which means that they get diagnosed easier because it's so much more expressive. So that's one of the things that I can see a difference between my daughter and me and my husband, is that we have very different ways of expressing. I am also a woman that has grown up under a period where women should, even 20 years ago, women shouldn't be in sales roles, we shouldn't succeed, all of this that was much more prominent before, but are still available. Like, it's still here with us. And my daughter grew up without that being a thing. For her, women are much more powerful than men will ever be, according to her view. And she has a very different expression than I do, even if we're both women. So I think that neurodivergency, the spectrum is huge. And the only way to figure out how to support your team member is to talk to them and actually give a shit about them, like on a personal level.
And you just nicely touched my next topic that I wanted to touch, is womanhood and leadership. And you've held very high level leadership roles in field that is still often male dominated.
Yes.
What has been your experience being a woman in leadership, and have you faced any unique challenges?
I don't know if there's any unique challenges based on the space I'm in. I think that most male-dominated professions, women face the same thing. We face discouragement, that people will discourage us. We face being interrupted a lot. We face being complimented in a misogynistic way. We face being backstabbed in conversations by male counterparts or male leaders. We face a lot of discrimination in the workplace, where we see team members who are female be outright, like, disgustingly misogynistically joked about, or whatever we want to call it. This is just a reality. I had a long period of my career where I convinced myself that I work well in this environment, that I basically internalized misogyny. So I basically was like, so I am one of the women who are much more like the men. Since I'm a bit better than the other women. And this literally happened to me. And I'm a pretty aware person. But I was in this environment for so long that it ate itself into me. So again, one of the things that my husband did was to pull me out of it. He's a huge feminist. Like, he's a lot more feministic than I am. And I'm a pretty strong-headed feminist at this point. But he was like, so do you not see these things and these things and these things? And do you think they're okay? It's like, no. It's like, so let's make them stop. He had an educational period with me. And again, I consider myself very well-read and aware. And I still internalized a lot of this shit. And then I sort of moved away from that, and suddenly I started seeing everything. And when you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. All the micro misogyny that happens in a work environment is disgustingly clear to me now. And it makes me feel sad. Like how I see it now makes me feel sad. One of the examples I can give is that when I will speak in a meeting, people are more likely, even if I'm saying the same things as my husband and co-founder, people are more likely to start doing other things when we're in online meetings. And I'm a pretty engaging person. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with the fact that when he speaks, people will listen. And when I speak, saying the same things, we have tested this several times, by the way, where I will say I will say something and he will say the same sentence 2 minutes later. And he gets a very different response. And again, the idea that this is the reality we live in makes me very sad. Having 2 girls at home, being a woman in this position, that we're still gonna listen to jokes about, how wives are. Like, this is not, we're 2024. Aren't we past this? Going into LinkedIn, seeing pictures of events for sauce being only men in the pictures. Like, these things are saddening to me. And one of the challenges I think we have is that when you are in the environment we're in, we are conditioned as women to not address these things. And men are conditioned to not address them either. We can take an example of how to address a situation that is uncomfortable. If someone makes a bad joke, asking, so what is funny? What was funny with that? And if the men in the room will ask that, these men who comment like that will stop doing it. But a lot of men will not say anything. And that's a challenge in itself. And the idea that we would change this all on our own without allies, I don't believe. I think we need allies to move this position we're in. One of the challenges that I also see is that with the blue winds that are blowing in the EU, EMEA area, the blue-brown winds, it's not going to get better unless we make a real change. because already now we see that misogyny and violence against women are rising all over Europe. So since it is, that means that women hating is rising, and women hating rising means things for workplaces. And this is something that I think we need to actively work against. We need to actively talk about it a lot. And we need to take no bullshit anymore. So when we hear misogynistic comments or comments that are underlined of a misogynistic base, we need to talk. We need to step in and say something, even if that comment wasn't directed to us. When someone is speaking and gets interrupted, we need to say, but why are you interrupting? These are things that we need to be aware of. And there are interesting studies done on interruption patterns in meetings and stuff with women and men in it. So men's perception is that women speak more than men. That's men's perception. Oh, they speak so much. It's completely incorrect. So women will speak 5% of the time, approximately, and men will speak 75% of the time. But still, men perceive it as us speaking more. So this disconnect, this dissonance in experience, what's happening, is part of micro signs in society that we are not equal, not even close to where we should. And as a female leader, what I did after I sort of understood what was happening for me being in an environment, I had to take a look at myself in the mirror and be like, so what am I doing to support women's movement in the workplace? And the truth was that at that point, I wasn't. I was moving me. So that was a shift that I had to go through a couple of years back, where I realized that I was sort of damaged by being in the environment. And the fact that I was, we can excuse it all we want, but it happens easily. But we need to be aware that if it happens, that we can stop it and see ourselves in the mirror and be like, wait, now, who are you supporting now? Are you supporting yourself only, or are you trying to support other people in the workplace? And this is not just women. I mean also immigrants. I mean also people who have situations that isn't as easy, because some of us in the workplace is privileged and some of us are not. Women are not privileged. Immigrants are not privileged. People who don't speak the language in the country they're in, they're not privileged. All of these people are non-privileged people. So as a leader, my job is to support all of these people in a group, not just one of the groups inside that group, but all of us.
I have a very interesting example when you talked about your husband being listened to while you were ignored. It was literally just recently, and it wasn't even work environment. It was after work conversation, and I was telling to someone what I do in my day-to-day work life and who I'm working with. And they started asking about, I was like, oh, we're hiring. So we had a conversation about recruitment. And then out of nowhere, that person literally went to my partner who never hired the person in their life. And he was like, oh, so what do you think who we should hire? And I was like, excuse me, what's happening here? And they didn't understand why. And I got really annoyed at this. I was like, I don't understand why you asking him when he never hired. He literally IC performer and always been, and he doesn't want to change. And you're asking him, and there's like, oh, you're reacting too harshly. That's not what I mean. I just want to understand from people in the industry. And I was like, he's not even in your industry.
I have several situations like that too. And one of the examples that comes to mind now, we were in a conversation with a few people in a work setting, and one of them, I was saying something. So George was saying something first, and then I sort of lagged onto his conversation and joined and sort of came with my point of view, delivered it very similar tone and everything, very clear, because I'm very clear. And the person's reaction to me was that he literally said, but why are you so aggressive? And my husband, again, the huge feminist he is, he's more champion for women's rights than I am. And I'm pretty hardcore nowadays. He turned to him like, you would never say that to me. I said the same thing. Why are you calling her aggressive? Why are you not calling me aggressive? What is the difference? And then he started teasing the person, like trying to jab at them about the behavior. And this is very, very common, because when I talk, I come off as aggressive. When he talks, he's affirmative. He's a good leader. And these are things that they bother me under my skin so much. And we had another conversation. We were sitting with a couple of friends at a dinner setting, and we were arguing that, because my point of view is that all men should go through therapy, mandatory every week, so that we would prevent crime rates and suicide and, all the things that men create. And George is very much on board with this. He was like, yes, it should be mandatory. And if you don't show up, you should get penalized by the state you would have to pay fines, like you would actually have to pay for not showing up, because this is such a great thing. He goes into therapy himself. We all go to therapy in this family because it's such a great thing to grow yourself and to really understand yourself. And why wouldn't you want to? This is stupid. And one of our friends was like, yeah, but that's very invasive. And I was like, do you know how invasive sexual assault is? Do you know how invasive it is? You think this is invasive? I got pissed. I was like, invasive my ass. Should the government decide? Like, the government is trying to decide on our wounds. Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, we're not supposed to decide on having babies anymore. Like, what do you mean invasive, that you go and you get help once a week? Like, this is not invasive. And George had a very similar reaction. He was like, so why do you think it's invasive? And then the friend tried to explain, and then he shut him down, and he was like, yeah, but I see your point. But when I said the same thing, he was like, no, but that's insane, because I'm insane and George has a point. And these are things that I can't unsee. So now that I see them, and these are things I wouldn't have reacted to 6 years ago. It would have just flown past my head, because this is just how it is. This is just the reality I live in. It's always been like this. It will always be like this. And now I'm like, yeah, maybe it doesn't have to be.
You get very comfortable ignoring the fact, because you know that every single confrontation that you will have going to lead into more arguments, and the more you confront someone, the more you will hear like, why you're being so aggressive, or woman's always so emotional. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of women choose to stay silent as well. But very
You
similarly
get
to what you
tired.
said, it is tiring work to think for yourself and for men as well.
It is.
But one of the things that very similarly to what you said regarding therapy every week, I always laugh that when in Lithuania, specifically, I don't know how other countries, but it's still not necessarily too religious of a country, but getting married in a church is almost like a mandatory thing to do as a couple. And everyone, to get married as a couple, you have to go through teachings with a priest or religious leader who's going to teach you. And I always say that instead of going to a religious leader, go to a therapist as a couple for like half a year and then get married. That's going to be so much more beneficial than listening about any religion, whatever religion you take. Like, understanding and listening to your partner is going to be more beneficial to you than listening to someone else telling you how to live this sacred and beautiful life.
100% agree. And that's the thing too, because I have gone to thousands of hours of therapy. I started going to therapy when I was like 19. Like, I've done my share of hours in therapy. And if you actually put people in therapy when they're 15 and beyond, so they go every week, mandated and paid by for the state, our crime rates will go down. They will just go down. One of the reasons why we have high crime in poverty areas is because they have no options and no help. So when you look at the situation, obviously we need to also address the fact that they're poor. That's why. So we need to address two things: mental health, how you feel and how supported you are, and number two, to not have poverty areas. Like, all of these things together drive crime rates. And it's the same thing with violence against women. If you have therapy mandatory for all boys from 15, you will catch the people who are likely to beat their wives before they beat their wives. You will find them, see the signs, and be like, we need to address this now. And if we don't do something like that, what happens is what's happening now. Did you see the story in France about the husband who...
Very closely, and it's the most annoying part where now the perpetrators became victims, and I'm absolutely raging. Any article just puts me into rage.
And I understand that. Do you know what I found most fascinating with this story? Is that the people who did this to her, the people who went to their home to her, these people are normal men. And we keep painting the monster of the man who does things like this. So I saw a statistic that said that 45% of drug, when you drug someone's drink, when you spike someone's drink, happens in your home. The bar is not that big of a problem. What happens is that your husband will do this to you at home. So 45% of all cases where someone gets drugged because they want to rape you, it's because of you being at home with your partner. And these things are things we don't address. So this was something that her husband did to her. That's supposed to be your partner, to love you and care for you.
And I think one thing to add as well, even to those who are not doing that themselves, therapy would help to prevent others. And actually, when someone's making a joke about sexual abuse, you should be one telling them, like, that's not really funny, is it?
Yes,
Like, why
yes.
you think it's okay to joke about it? But not a lot of people actually do that. And we still have, as sad as that is, we still have a very small percentage of people who are those allies that women actually need, and not necessarily women, that others need, and the healthy society need to support each other, and men need to support other men as well. And I think that would be so much easier
if everyone understood how this works, because in therapy you will talk about how these things build. Because one of the things that I also thought a lot about is that, so we are tolerating misogyny to such a high extent. So in an actually tolerant society, we have an intolerance to intolerance. So this is something that should fall under the bucket of, this is something we cannot tolerate if we're going to be a society that prioritizes tolerance. So there is the paradox of tolerance. You can't have a tolerant society without being intolerant to intolerance. And this is something that most people don't even think about in their lives. So jokes of this type, comments in the boardroom or in the meeting room or in the management team or in the after work, all of these things in workplaces needs to be shut down straight away. It needs to be shut down, like verbally. We need to point at these people and say, so that was misogynistic. I'm surprised you thought that you could say that out loud. I'm surprised, because the person will shrink into themselves. And the next time they want to pull a joke like that, they would think twice. And these are the things we need to drive in workplaces. I did a guide, me and my partner did a guide a couple of years ago. We did a fundraiser for women's rights on International Women's Day for leaders on how to be inclusive in the workspace. This was literally 1 page. So how do you show that you have no tolerance for this bullshit openly, verbally, in front of people? Because it's a super important part of keeping a workplace feeling safe.
Is this published somewhere?
Yeah, I can send a link to it.
Okay, yeah, I will add that to the comments below, and I'll share that with my network so you can find. As we discussed in the very first meeting, we definitely need more time because we can talk about so many different things, about all of the intricacies in very deep topics. But as we're running out of time, one thing that I do want to ask, so what's next for you, Sara? Are there any projects or goals that you're particularly excited about for the future?
Yes, there is. So first of all, I want to do Break the Box for 5 more years with my partner. And then I want to stop working. And then I want to write my books. So my next goal now is 5 years ahead of time. It is a long-term goal. I have several fiction books that are works in project, both in my head and also on paper, that I want to start publishing in 5 years. So I have a long-term goal. We're going to grow to a certain extent so we can exit and then not have to work anymore. So we can go retire from work at 45, basically. So that's my goal right now. And besides that, I don't really have any other goals besides being happy as much as I can every day. That's a goal too.
That's probably the hardest one to have.
I know, right?
And what legacy do you hope to leave behind, both personally and professionally?
As a person, I would like to reach as many people as I can to have them make more conscious decisions. Because one of the things that I can see in the world is that we have a tendency of going through life without taking accountability or even being aware of the decisions we do on a micro level every day. And micro decisions that we're not in control of leads us down paths that we might not want to go, which often leads to burnout situations or a 40-year crisis where you leave your life because you haven't lived enough. All of these things that comes from us sort of being in the wheel and just moving ahead slowly without even thinking about what we want in life. So having a question asked to yourself every day that is, so how happy was I today? Because these are things that are important for you to feel fulfilled as a person. So making more conscious decisions. And when I talk about mental health and when I talk about workplace and when I talk about where I came from and how I came to the place I am today, all of these things were very conscious decisions to get to the place I am. And I think that it's important that we recognize how much that impacts our direction. So that's why I'm talking about all the other things besides work that has to do with feeling well, because I think it's the most important thing in your life, that you feel well in your life.
So just to finalize, what advice would you love to leave our listeners with, especially those who may be finding navigating challenges in their own career a little bit too hard at the moment?
Number one, get a mentor. Get someone who can support you, who you can talk to, who is a person that you want to be like. So I would find a person who's higher up in the hierarchy in another company, talk to them, get a mentorship, do it once a month. So talk to a person outside of your normal world so you get some perspective. Number two, start reading books. That's my go-to for everything, but it's so important.
And it's easy to do as well. It's one that there's still plenty of libraries and other ways to find books. So it's one that you can achieve without even having a significant financial contribution.
Yes. And my third thing that I would like to close with is you deserve to be happy. So go find happiness.
It's so beautiful. I got goosebumps. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. How can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work, your career, where people can find you? And I will add everything in the description.
LinkedIn. So just send me a connection request. Start talking to me. I answer on LinkedIn basically every day. So I'm very available. Feel free to ask. I will help if I can. So just reach out.
For now, it was absolute pleasure having you. And I have a feeling it's not the last conversation we're going to have.
No.
Because it's clear we had about 20 other topics in this 2 hours that we had.
100%.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.